All right, I'm making a quick video on how and when to use a belt for bracing, or for squatting, deadlifting, whatever it is that you want to use it for. Before you use a belt, you have to understand how to properly brace your core, right, for any big lift. So when I'm talking about your core musculature, I'm talking about your abs, your obliques, your spinal erectors. I'll probably throw your lats in because that is a big part of bracing as well. But the first part is some people will call it diaphragmatic breathing. You'll hear people in like a meet say big breath. I'll sometimes yell big breath, big air, whatever it is. But what we're looking for is air. All right, we want expansion of your diaphragm. Usually this is accomplished via air, all right, into here. So what you'll see, right, and oftentimes what I tell people is I want a three-dimensional breath here, here, and back here as well. All right, so from the front, right, into the abs, you'll see from the side, right, anytime I'm bracing, it should look something like this. And then I hold that breath, and then I flex my abs as if somebody's gonna punch me in the stomach, right? Sometimes you'll see a lot of people with big air here, right? So your chest is going to rise a little bit when you brace, right? However, I should not see a tremendous amount of chest lift. First of all, it's probably put you into an overextended position. And second of all, that probably means that a lot of that air, or at least not as much as you want, is going into your diaphragm, all right? So a little chest rise, okay. Too much, not so much, right? So air here, you should see a little expansion here, right? So if I press in here and I take a big breath, so this should expand as well, right? And then finally back here, right, as we breathe, it should be, so you should see this right here. Air going into the abs, obliques, spinal erectors, right? Again, so while I'm squatting and sitting up for a squat, it's hold that air, flex everything super tight, including the lats, right? And that should help stabilize the weight while you're squatting, deadlifting, or whatever else you need to do. The question that's been asked to me is, when do you start to use a belt? And you'll see a lot of varying recommendations. A lot of people say you don't need a belt at all because you want to train your core or whatever the hell it is. In my opinion, I like to start people on a belt somewhere after about 6 months to a year, right? And I do this for a few reasons because one, they're, in the first 6 months of their lifting career, they have other things to worry about. So with the squat, for instance, they need to worry about, keeping their feet flat. They need to worry about appropriate depth. They need to worry about like knee position, right? Where the load is relatively light. So bracing, right, should be focused on to a larger extent later on, after 3 months, 6 months, 8 months. After that, I personally think it's okay to throw on a belt after 6 months to a year if they have all the other elements mastered. And I think that for a few reasons. One is because, the biggest reason I should say, is because it's a teaching tool. Some people just don't understand what it feels like to expand three-dimensionally. The belt should give you a better feel for what it's like to breathe out, because you have something, in a sense, almost palpating you, right? Almost like a PT palpating a muscle and teaching you how to activate a certain muscle. The belt is going to be around your core, and you could get a better feel for what it's like to expand three-dimensionally. All right, so with my belts, right, you got essentially three types of belts, but we'll talk about two today. You've got a standard Velcro belt, where I'll show you with my belts. It looks something like this, right? We're in tight. And then from here, I just latch the lever. There should be a little room, right? It shouldn't feel like it's choking you, but it should be relatively tight. If it's sliding at all while you're squatting or deadlifting, that means it's probably not too tight. It should be fairly tight before you even brace. It should be even tighter when you go to brace. So once again, as I breathe into the belt, right, it should look like this. Tight, and I should be able to support larger loads while I am lifting, which in turn, if I'm using larger loads, my musculature can now be activated to a greater extent. All right, so that's why I think it's important to use a belt, because we want to turn on all of that musculature. It's not just about strength, right? It's also about turning on that musculature to fire more efficiently. If you're worried about your spine, right, caving over, right, at certain weights just because your core isn't tight enough, right, you're at a disadvantage in developing all of that musculature. It's just not going to fire as strongly at 275 versus 175. So I do think it's okay to wear a belt, you know, after a year. I don't think you need, like some people have a rule of thumb, like to squat 2 times your body weight before you put on belts. I don't believe in that. As long as you have all the basics down, 6 months to a year is a good idea.